The research probe came back on a Tuesday. Dr. Taman was in his office when the alert chimed through the station's communication system. He set down his translation tablet and watched through the window as the small, battered probe docked with the Galactic Archive Station. The station hung in space like a massive ring, orbiting the neutron star Keith 9. Its walls were transparent in places, showing the swirling dance of cosmic radiation that made the star look like it was breathing. Taman had worked at the archive for 30 years. He was Velocian, which meant his body was thin and tall, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. His sensory organs grew from his temples like small crystals, and they picked up sound and light in ways human eyes and ears never could. He was a linguist. His job was to study dead languages, the languages of species that no longer existed or languages that had been replaced by newer ones. The probe had been sent to the Outer Veil 6 months ago. Nobody really expected it to find anything. The Outer Veil was a region of space where nothing lived. No planets with water, no resources worth mining, just empty darkness and the occasional dead star. But the Galactic Council liked to be thorough, so they sent probes anyway. Taman walked down the curved corridor to the main examination hall. Other researchers were already gathering. He saw Velcros, the master archivist, standing near the probe's containment field. Velcros was Thulian, a species that looked like they were made of gray stone with 6 arms and eyes that glowed faint blue. Velcros was old, even by Thulian standards, and he treated the archive like it was his personal temple. "What did it find?" Taman asked. Velcros didn't look at him. "A fragment, stone, covered in symbols." The containment field hummed as a mechanical arm lifted the object from the probe's storage chamber. It was a piece of rock, roughly rectangular, about the size of a human book. The surface was covered in marks, carved symbols that seemed to dance across the stone in patterns that made Taman's crystals tingle. "Run it through the translation matrix," Velcros ordered. A technician activated the archive's main computer system. The translation matrix was the pride of the Galactic Archive. It contained every known language from 847 species across known space. Living languages, dead languages, symbolic languages, mathematical languages, everything. If a symbol had ever been used to communicate, the matrix knew about it. The system scanned the fragment. Taman watched the holographic display as the computer tried to match the symbols to known alphabets. It cycled through Velocian script, Thulian ideograms, the flowing curves of Myothan writing, the geometric precision of Kandorian mathematics. Nothing matched. The computer tried reading the symbols left to right, then right to left, then vertically, then in spiral starting from the center. It attempted pattern recognition, looking for repeated symbols that might indicate common words. It analyzed the depth of the carvings, the tool marks, the spacing between characters. Still nothing. Taman moved closer to the hologram. The symbols were beautiful in a strange way. Some looked almost like letters he recognized, but not quite. They had the structure of language, he could see that much. There was organization here, intention. But the patterns were chaotic. A line of symbols reading left to right would suddenly break and continue vertically down the stone. Then the next line would spiral inward. Then back to horizontal, but right to left this time. Could it be decorative? Asked one of the other researchers, a Myothan named Sella. Her species had fur that changed color with their emotions, and right now it was flickering between blue and green, confusion and curiosity. Velcros made a sound like grinding rocks. Possibly. Some primitive cultures create patterns that mimic language without actual meaning. It's not uncommon, but Taman wasn't sure. He had studied dead languages for most of his life. He knew the difference between decoration and communication. This was communication. He was certain of it. But from whom? And why couldn't they read it? The research team spent the next 4 hours running every test they could think of. They analyzed the chemical composition of the stone. It was silicon-based, common throughout the galaxy. They dated it using radioactive decay, approximately 11,000 years old. They examined the tool marks, hand-carved, not machine-made. Nothing helped them read it. By evening, most of the researchers had given up and returned to their quarters. Velcros ordered the fragment moved to a display case in the main hall, where it would sit alongside other mysteries the archive had never solved. Taman stayed late, staring at the holographic projection, trying to see something everyone else had missed. That's when he heard the footsteps. Taman turned and saw a human walking across the main hall. She was young, probably in her mid-20s by human standards. She had dark hair pulled back in a simple tie, and she wore the plain gray uniform of an exchange student. She was carrying a stack of old manuscripts under one arm and a paper cup of what humans called coffee in her other hand. Humans were new to the galactic community. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel 200 years ago. Most species viewed them as children, enthusiastic and energetic, but lacking the depth of knowledge that came with thousands of years of spacefaring civilization. The Galactic Council had created exchange programs to help humans learn, but few took them seriously. The human stopped walking. She was staring at the holographic projection of the fragment, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her mouth. Taman watched her eyes move across the symbols, left to right, then down, then spiraling. Her expression changed. It was subtle, but Taman's crystals picked up the shift in her breathing, the slight widening of her eyes. "That's not decoration," she said quietly. Her voice carried in the empty hall. Taman's crystals perked up. "You can tell?" She looked at him, seeming surprised that he had heard her. "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just—" She gestured at the hologram. "That's language." "Definitely language." Velcross's voice boomed from across the hall. Taman hadn't realized the master archivist was still there. And what would a human student know about xenolinguistics? The human straightened, clutching her manuscripts a little tighter. "I'm Hana. I'm working in the Earth manuscript section. I've been cataloging old human writing systems." Velcros made his grinding sound again. "Human writing systems are barely 3,000 years old. This fragment is 11,000 years old and was found 3,000 light years from Earth. I doubt your experience is relevant here." Hana's face flushed slightly, but she didn't back down. Taman noticed her hand tighten on her coffee cup. "I just meant that the pattern looks intentional. The way it switches direction, that's not random. Some Earth cultures did similar things." "Similar is not the same," Velcro said. He waved one of his 6 hands dismissively. "Return to your duties." Hana nodded and walked away quickly, her footsteps echoing in the hall. Taman watched her go. There had been something in her voice. Not just academic interest. Something else. Recognition. He looked back at the fragment, then at the corridor where Hana had disappeared. The archive had thousands of researchers from hundreds of species. They had translation matrices and quantum computers and 11,000 years of collective knowledge, and none of them could read the fragment. But a human graduate student had stopped in her tracks and said with absolute certainty that it was language. Taman made a decision. Tomorrow he would talk to her. Properly. Something told him that the answer to this mystery wasn't going to come from the computers or the matrices or the collective wisdom of 847 species. It was going to come from page 6 of a battered notebook, written by hand in a language most of the galaxy had never even heard of. Hana couldn't sleep. She lay in her small quarters, staring at the ceiling. The room was basic: a bed, a desk, a storage locker, and a tiny bathroom. Through the window, she could see the neutron star spinning in the distance, its radiation creating ribbons of light that pulsed like a heartbeat. But she wasn't thinking about the star. She was thinking about the symbols. She had seen something in that fragment, something familiar. It had been just a glimpse, just a few seconds of looking at the holographic projection, but her brain had caught on something. A pattern, a structure. The way the lines changed direction reminded her of something her grandmother had shown her years ago. Hana sat up and turned on the small lamp beside her bed. She reached under the bed and pulled out a battered box. Inside were a few personal items she had brought from Earth. Photos of her family, a small stone from the beach near her childhood home, and a notebook. The notebook was old. The cover was made of worn leather, and the pages inside were yellowed paper. Actual paper, not a digital display. Her grandmother had given it to her before she died. Her grandmother had been a linguist too, obsessed with dead and forgotten writing systems from Earth's history. She had spent her whole life documenting scripts that had been lost or absorbed into other languages. Hana opened the notebook carefully. Her grandmother's handwriting filled every page. Small, precise notes, drawings of symbols, explanations of how ancient people had written before modern alphabets took over. She started flipping through the pages. Rongorongo from Easter Island, a script nobody had ever fully deciphered. Indus Valley seals covered in symbols from a civilization that vanished 4,000 years ago. Linear A from ancient Crete. Proto-Elamite from Persia. Ogham from Ireland, where letters were represented by lines carved into standing stones. Page 6. Hannah stopped. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked at the drawings on the page. Boustrophodon. The word meant, as the ox plows. It was a style of writing used by ancient Mediterranean cultures, where each line of text alternated direction. The first line read left to right. The second line read right to left. The third line went left to right again, back and forth like an ox plowing a field, but that wasn't all. Her grandmother had made notes about how some ancient Korean scripts called Idu used rotational reading, where you had to turn the page to read certain characters, and how Chinese oracle bone script layered meanings on top of each other, so a single symbol could mean multiple things depending on context. Hannah's heart was beating faster now. She grabbed her tablet and pulled up the image she had secretly captured of the fragment before Velcros had dismissed her. It was against regulations to take images without permission, but she had done it anyway. She compared the fragment to her grandmother's notes. The symbols didn't match exactly, but the structure did. The way the writing switched from horizontal to vertical, the way some characters seemed to spiral inward, the negative space between symbols, spaces that weren't just empty but seemed to carry meaning themselves. This wasn't one writing system. It was a combination. Someone had taken multiple human writing systems and merged them together into something new. But that was impossible. The fragment was 11,000 years old. Humans hadn't even invented writing 11,000 years ago. They were still hunter-gatherers. And the fragment had been found 3,000 light-years from Earth. None of it made sense. Hannah knew what she had to do. She had to tell someone. But Velcros had already dismissed her. He wouldn't listen to a human exchange student claiming that an alien artifact used Earth writing systems. She needed someone else. Someone who might actually listen. Dr. Taman. She had noticed the way he looked at her when she spoke. Not dismissive like Velcros. Curious like he was actually considering what she said. Hannah checked the time. It was early morning by station standards. The archive would be mostly empty. She got dressed, grabbed her notebook, and headed for the main research level. When she arrived at Taman's office, she was surprised to find him already there. He was sitting at his desk, surrounded by holographic displays of the fragment. He looked up when she knocked on the open door. "Hannah," he said. His voice had a musical quality to it, like wind chimes. "I was going to come find you this morning." She blinked. "You were?" He gestured for her to come in. "You saw something yesterday. In the fragment." "I want to know what it was." Hannah felt relief wash over her. She stepped into the office and closed the door behind her. "I need to show you something, but you have to promise to actually look at it, not just dismiss it because I'm human." Taman's crystals flickered. Hannah had learned that meant he was interested. "I promise." She set her notebook on his desk and opened it to page 6. Then she pulled up the fragment image on her tablet and placed it beside the notebook. "This," she said, pointing to her grandmother's notes, "is Boustrophodon, an ancient Earth writing style where the lines alternate direction. And this," she pointed to another section, "is Ogham. And this is similar to Idu script. And the way the symbols layer over each other is like oracle bone script." Taman leaned forward, his eyes moving between the notebook and the fragment. His crystals were glowing brighter now. "The fragment isn't using one writing system," Hannah continued. "It's using pieces of several. All of them from Earth. All of them thousands of years old. Most of them dead or mostly forgotten." Taman was silent for a long moment. His fingers traced the air above the holographic display, following the patterns Hannah had pointed out. "Can you read it?" he asked finally. Hannah hesitated. "I think so. Maybe. If I have time to work on it." Taman stood up suddenly. He was much taller than Hannah, and his movements were graceful in a way that reminded her of water flowing. "We need to call an emergency council session." Hannah's stomach dropped. "Master Archivist Velcros will never." "Velcros doesn't get to decide this," Taman interrupted. "If you're right, if this fragment is truly based on human writing systems, then this is the most significant discovery the archive has made in a century. Maybe longer." He was already moving toward the door, his long legs carrying him quickly. Hannah grabbed her notebook and hurried after him. Within the hour, the main council chamber was filled. Researchers from a dozen different species crowded around the central display table. Velcros sat at the head, His 6 arms crossed in a way that made his displeasure obvious. Taman presented Hana's findings. He projected her grandmother's notebook alongside the fragment. He highlighted the similarities in structure, the way the writing systems had been combined. The council murmured. Some were intrigued. Others were skeptical. This is speculation, Velcro said. Similar patterns don't prove a connection. But then Hana spoke up. Her voice was quieter than Taman's, but it carried in the chamber. I can prove it. Give me access to the fragment data. Let me work on the translation. If I'm wrong, you lose nothing. If I'm right, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Velcro stared at her for a long moment. Finally, he made his grinding sound. You have 1 week. If you cannot produce a meaningful translation in 1 week, this matter is closed. Hana nodded. 1 week, she could work with that. As the council dispersed, another human approached her. Dr. Yuna was older than Hana, maybe in her 40s. She had been working at the archive for 5 years, longer than any other human. Be careful, Yuna said quietly. They're giving you a chance, but they're also setting you up to fail. 1 week isn't enough time to translate an entirely new language. Hana looked down at her grandmother's notebook, at the careful handwriting that had documented so many forgotten ways of communicating. Then I guess I better get started, she said. Hana didn't leave her workstation for 3 days. The archive had given her a small office near the xenolinguistics lab. It wasn't much, just a desk, a chair, and a wall of holographic displays, but it was hers. The fragment data rotated slowly in the air in front of her, each symbol highlighted and isolated. Her grandmother's notebook lay open beside her keyboard, its pages weighted down with a coffee cup. She had been right about the Boustrophodon structure. The first line of symbols read left to right. The second line read right to left, with the characters themselves flipped horizontally like a mirror image, but it wasn't consistent. Every few lines, the text would suddenly shift to vertical, or spiral inward, or break into fragments that seemed scattered randomly across the stone, except they weren't random. That was the key insight that had come to her on the second night, when she was so tired her eyes were burning. The scattered fragments weren't mistakes or damage. They were intentional. They were using the same principle as Korean Idu script, where certain characters could only be read by rotating the page. But this was even more complex. Some symbols overlapped, creating composite meanings like Chinese oracle bone script. Some were carved deeper than others, which changed their significance, and some used the negative space, the empty areas between carvings, as part of the language itself. It was brilliant. And it was absolutely human. On the 4th day, Taman came to check on her. He brought food, some kind of nutrient paste that his species ate, along with a sandwich he had gotten from the human section of the station cafeteria. Have you slept? He asked. Hana grabbed the sandwich without looking away from the displays. A little, maybe. What day is it? Thursday. Then I have 3 days left. She took a bite of the sandwich. It was dry, but she didn't care. I can read it now. Most of it, anyway. Taman's crystals flickered brightly. Show me. Hana pulled up a section of the fragment she had translated. The symbols appeared alongside her translation in standard galactic common. The writing starts here, she said, pointing to the top left corner. It reads, This is the record of Jiho, daughter of Earth, keeper of the silent path. Then it switches direction and continues. We departed under the light of the twin moons, when the calculations aligned. The fold carried us beyond the wall of stars. She paused and looked at Taman. The fold. That's what it says. Like folding space. But humans didn't have that technology 11,000 years ago. We barely have it now. Taman moved closer to the display. What else does it say? Hana scrolled to another section. This part is a warning. Do not follow the silent ships. They move between the places where reality bends. They do not speak. They do not die. They only watch and wait. The office was quiet except for the hum of the holographic projectors. Taman's breathing had changed. Hana could hear it, faster and more shallow. This is impossible, he said softly. I know. If this translation is accurate, it means humans were traveling through space thousands of years before you invented the wheel. I know. And these silent ships? I don't know what they are. Hana interrupted. But whoever Jiho was, she was scared of them. Really scared. The symbols get more erratic toward the end, like she was rushing. Or panicking. Taman turned away from the display and looked at Hana directly. We need to present this to the council today, now. Hana felt a spike of anxiety. I'm not finished. There are sections I still can't read. The damage to the stone. What you have is enough, Taman said. Trust me. 2 hours later, Hana stood in the council chamber again. This time it was completely full. Word had spread through the archive that the human student might have actually decoded the fragment. Researchers from dozens of species filled the seats, their various forms creating a strange gallery of shapes and colors. Velcro sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Hana's hands were shaking as she activated the presentation. She projected her translation alongside the original fragment. She explained the writing system she had identified. She showed how they combined and overlapped. She walked the council through each line of text she had decoded. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Then everyone started talking at once. A Kandorian researcher stood up, his geometric body pulsing with agitation. This makes no sense. Humans were primitive 11,000 years ago, cave dwellers. You didn't even have agriculture yet. That's what our records say, Hana agreed. But this fragment suggests otherwise. A Myothan scientist, her fur shifting through rapid color changes, leaned forward. Could this be a hoax? Someone creating false evidence to make humanity seem more advanced than it is? Velcros raised one of his hands for silence. The room quieted. He looked at Hana with his glowing blue eyes. The fragment is 11,000 years old. We confirmed that through isotope dating. It was found 3,000 light-years from Earth, in a region no human ship has ever visited. How do you explain that? Hana had been expecting this question. She had spent the last 3 days thinking about it. I can't, she said simply. I can't explain how human writing ended up out there. I can't explain how someone named Jiho was traveling through folded space when humans were supposed to be living in caves. But I can read what's written on that stone, and it's definitely human language. Composite modified, but human. Taman stood up. The question isn't whether this makes sense with what we think we know about human history. The question is what we do with this information. A researcher from the back of the room spoke up. The fragment mentions coordinates, doesn't it? In the warning about the silent ships? Hana nodded. She had noticed that too. Buried in the spiraling text near the bottom of the fragment were numbers. She had almost missed them because they were written in a base 12 system instead of base 10. But once she recognized the pattern, they were clear. Yes, she said. There are coordinates. Spatial coordinates pointing to a location in the outer veil. Velcros made his grinding sound. The probe that found this fragment. It came from that region. The chamber erupted in conversation again. Hana looked at Taman, who was staring at the projected coordinates with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then a new voice cut through the noise. We need to go there. Everyone turned. Director Kwan stood at the entrance to the chamber. He was the human overseer of the Terran exchange program. A compact man in his 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes. Hana had met him once, briefly, when she first arrived at the archive. Kwan walked to the front of the chamber. If there's even a chance that this translation is accurate, we need to investigate. The coordinates are right there. We send an expedition. Velcross's eyes dimmed. That region of space is dead. There's nothing there worth. There's a piece of human history there, Kwan interrupted. History that apparently predates everything we thought we knew about my species. That makes it worth investigating. Hana watched the exchange with growing disbelief. An expedition. They were actually considering it. Taman spoke up again. If we go, Hana must come with us. She's the only one who can read the script. If we find more fragments, more evidence, we'll need her expertise. Velcros looked like he wanted to argue, but several other council members were already nodding in agreement. Fine, Velcros said finally. We'll organize a small research expedition. A single ship. Minimal crew. You have 2 weeks to prepare. As the council dispersed, Hana felt someone touch her arm. It was Yuna, the other human linguist. Congratulations, Yuna said. You did it. You proved the translation. Hana looked down at her grandmother's notebook, still clutched in her hands. I proved I could read it. I didn't prove it makes sense. Maybe it doesn't have to make sense yet, Yuna said. Maybe you just need to follow it and see where it leads. Hana thought about the warning carved into the stone, about silent ships that moved between folded spaces, About someone named Jiho who had been terrified enough to leave a message that would last 11,000 years. "I'm not sure I want to know where it leads," Hana said quietly. But she knew she didn't have a choice. The coordinates were calling, and whatever was waiting in the outer veil had been there for a very, very long time. The ship was called the Meridian. It wasn't large, designed for a crew of 12 at most. The hull was sleek and dark, built for research rather than combat. Hana stood in the docking bay and watched as supplies were loaded into the cargo hold. Food, scientific equipment. Enough fuel for a 6-week round trip. She had never been on a deep space expedition before. The farthest she had traveled from Earth was to the archive station, and that had been through established jump gates with dozens of other ships. This was different. They would be going to a part of space where no one went, where there was nothing but darkness and dead stars. Nervous? Hana turned to see Yuna standing behind her. The older woman was carrying a bag over her shoulder. She had volunteered to join the expedition as Hana's assistant. Director Kwan had approved it immediately. "A little," Hana admitted. "Good," Yuna said. "Means you're taking it seriously." She looked up at the Meridian. "I've been on 3 deep space trips. They're never what you expect. Sometimes better. Sometimes worse. Usually both. The crew was small. Captain Davin was Kandorian. His species looked like they were made of interconnected geometric shapes that could rearrange themselves. He was efficient and quiet, which Hana appreciated. The pilot was Senna, a young Myothan whose fur stayed a steady green, meaning she was calm even under pressure. There were 2 engineers, a medical officer, and 3 scientists in addition to Hana and Yuna, and there was Taemin. He had insisted on coming, despite Velcros's objections. "I've been studying dead languages for 30 years, he had told the council. "I'm not going to miss the chance to see where one of them leads." Now he stood near the ship's entrance, his tall frame silhouetted against the bright lights of the docking bay. When he saw Hana, he raised one hand in greeting. "Ready?" he asked as she approached. "No," Hana said honestly, "but I don't think I ever will be." They boarded the ship together. The interior was functional. Narrow corridors, small cabins, a central commons area that doubled as the research lab. Hana's quarters were barely bigger than her room at the archive, but they had given her a desk and extra storage for her notebook and translation materials. The launch was smooth. Hana watched through the viewport as the archive station grew smaller, then disappeared entirely as the Meridian jumped to faster-than-light travel. The stars stretched into lines, then vanished into the strange non-color of FTL space. The journey would take 3 weeks. For the first few days, Hana worked on refining her translation. She had brought every piece of data about the fragment, and she went through it line by line, symbol by symbol. Taemin worked alongside her, asking questions, offering theories, challenging her interpretations. "This word here," he said on the 4th day, pointing to a cluster of symbols. "You translated it as fold, are you certain?" Hana zoomed in on the section. The symbol was composed of 2 overlapping characters, one from Boustrophodon, one from Ogham. "Pretty certain. The combination suggests a concept of bending or doubling over. In context, it makes sense. The fold carried us beyond the wall of stars, like folding space to travel faster than light. But humans didn't have FTL technology 11,000 years ago. Humans in our recorded history didn't," Hana corrected. "Maybe there was another group. A civilization that existed before the one we know about." Taemin's crystals flickered thoughtfully. "A lost civilization?" "It's not impossible. Many species have gaps in their early history, times that are poorly documented or completely forgotten." On the 10th day, Hana found something new in the text. She had been working on a section that was heavily damaged, where the stone had cracked and several symbols were incomplete. But by comparing it to patterns she had seen elsewhere in the fragment, she was able to fill in the gaps. "Taemin," she called across the lab. "Look at this." He came over immediately. Hana projected her translation. "We are the Wanderers. We left Earth when the calculations aligned, when the machines showed us the path through folded space. We thought we were the first to touch the stars. We were wrong. They were already there, waiting, watching, moving through the spaces between spaces. We call them the silent ships because they make no sound, emit no signals, show no life. But they are aware, and they follow." Taemin read it twice. "This is more than a warning. This is a confession." "She's telling us what happened," Hana agreed. Jiho and her people, these wanderers, they developed some kind of advanced technology. They left Earth, and they encountered something out there. Something that scared them enough to leave warnings in dead languages. Hana felt a chill run down her spine. Through the viewport, she could see the strange emptiness of FTL space. Out there in the real universe they were bypassing, the outer veil was getting closer. Over the next week, she translated more of the fragment. The story became clearer, though no less disturbing. The Wanderers had numbered in the thousands. They had built ships that could fold space without using the jump gates that modern civilizations relied on. They had explored regions of space that no one in the current galactic community had ever visited, and they had found the silent ships. Jiho's entries became more frantic toward the end. The symbols were carved deeper, the spacing more erratic. She wrote about her crew disappearing, about ships going dark and never responding to hails, about the feeling of being watched by something that existed in the cracks between dimensions. The final entry was brief. We tried to erase our path. We scattered our technology. We broke our language into pieces and buried it in the old scripts of Earth, the ones we knew would fade from memory. If anyone finds this, if Earth survives, do not follow. Do not look for us. The silence is patient. It waits forever. On the 20th day, the Meridian dropped out of FTL travel. Captain Davin's voice came over the ship's intercom. We've arrived at the coordinates. All science personnel to the observation deck. Hana and Taman made their way to the front of the ship. The observation deck had a large transparent viewport that showed the space ahead. At first, Hana thought there was nothing there. Just darkness and the faint light of distant stars. Then Senna adjusted the ship's sensors and the display lit up with data. There was a debris field ahead. Scattered across thousands of kilometers of space were fragments of metal, stone, and materials the sensors couldn't identify. Some pieces were as small as a fist. Others were the size of buildings. What is all this? Yuna whispered beside Hana. Captain Davin worked with Senna to run a more detailed scan. The results appeared on the main display. Ships, Davin said, his geometric body shifting with what looked like surprise. These are ship fragments. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Taman moved closer to the display. What kind of ships? Which species? Davin shook his head. The design doesn't match anything in the galactic database. The materials are strange too. Some of this looks organic, like it was grown instead of built. Hana felt her heart pounding. She knew what they had found. They're human ships. The Wanderers' ships. Director Kwan, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. Can we get closer? I want to see one of these ships up close. Senna piloted the Meridian carefully through the debris field. They passed twisted metal that might have once been hull plating. They saw fragments that looked like they had been torn apart by incredible force, and then they saw something intact. It was a ship, or part of one. Maybe a third of the original vessel remained, tumbling slowly through space. The design was unlike anything Hana had ever seen. It looked organic, with curves and flowing lines that seemed almost biological, but it was clearly a spacecraft. She could see what might have been engines, viewports, docking ports. Can we board it? Hana asked. Davin looked at his displays. Atmosphere is gone. Radiation levels are high but not dangerous. I can get us close enough to send over a boarding team. Kwan nodded. Do it. I want to see what's inside. An hour later, Hana found herself in a spacesuit, floating through the airlock and into the wreckage of a ship that had been dead for thousands of years. Taman was beside her along with Yuna and two of the engineers. They carried lights and scanning equipment, moving carefully through corridors that had long ago lost their gravity. The interior was eerie. Some sections were destroyed beyond recognition, but others looked almost preserved. Hana saw what might have been a control room, with panels that bore symbols she recognized from her translation work. She saw quarters where people might have slept. She saw personal items floating in the zero gravity, objects that looked human in design but wrong in subtle ways. And she saw more fragments, more stones carved with the composite script. Over here, Yuna called. She was in a chamber that looked like it had been used for storage. Dozens of stone tablets were secured to the walls, each one covered in symbols. Hana moved closer and began scanning the tablets with her handheld device. These were journals, records, more entries from Jiho and others like her. She started translating on the spot, speaking the words aloud as she worked through the symbols. Entry 47. We've lost contact with the colony ship Promise. It stopped responding 3 days ago. We sent a scout ship to investigate, but they found nothing. The Promise is gone. No wreckage, no bodies, just empty space where it should have been. She moved to another tablet. Entry 52. The silence is spreading. We see them now on our sensors. They appear at the edge of our range and then vanish. They never get close enough to study. Captain Minho thinks they're probing our defenses. I think they're hurting us. Another tablet. Entry 61. We're returning to the outer veil. It's the only place they don't follow. We don't know why. Maybe the radiation from the neutron stars interferes with them. Maybe they're just patient and know we'll have to leave eventually. Hana's hands were shaking now. The story was coming together. The Wanderers had fled to this region, hoping the harsh environment would protect them from whatever was hunting them. The final tablet was different from the others. The symbols were carved deeper with obvious urgency. Hana translated, "This is Jiho, last entry. We've hidden our technology in the void between stars. We've destroyed our ship so they can't be traced. We're going to try to fold back to Earth to warn them, but I don't think we'll make it. The silent ships are all around us now. If anyone finds these records, know that we tried. We saw wonders no human had ever imagined. We touched the stars themselves. But we also brought something back with us, something that notices, something that follows. Do not repeat our mistakes. Do not follow us into the dark." Hana looked up from the tablet. Through the viewport of the wrecked ship, she could see the meridian floating nearby. And beyond it, at the very edge of her vision, something moved. Something dark. Something that made no light. Something that was there and then not there, existing in the space between spaces. "We need to go," Hana said. "Right now. We need to get back to the ship." Taman had seen it too. His crystals had gone completely dark. "Everyone back to the airlock, move." They returned to the meridian in silence. As the airlock sealed behind them, Hana looked back at the wreckage one last time. The silent ship was still there, watching, waiting, just like it had waited for 11,000 years. Captain Davin ordered everyone to the bridge immediately. Hana stripped off her spacesuit with shaking hands and followed Taman through the narrow corridors of the meridian. The ship felt smaller now, more fragile. She kept thinking about that dark shape moving at the edge of the debris field, the way it had been there and then not there, like it existed in multiple places at once. When they reached the bridge, the entire crew was already gathered. Senna sat at the pilot's console, her fur flickering between orange and red, fear and alertness. Davin stood at the center, his geometric body arranged in a configuration that Hana had learned meant he was preparing for danger. "Show them," Davin said to one of the engineers. The main display activated. It showed a sensor recording from the last 30 minutes. At first, Hana saw nothing unusual, just the debris field and the wrecked ship they had boarded. Then the engineer highlighted something at the edge of the frame. A shadow. Not a shadow in the normal sense, but an absence. A place where sensors couldn't penetrate. It moved slowly, deliberately, weaving through the debris like it was searching for something. "It appeared 17 minutes ago," the engineer explained, "right after we entered the wrecked vessel. It's been circling our position ever since. What is it?" Yuna asked, though Hana suspected she already knew. "We don't know," Davin admitted. "It doesn't register as solid matter. Our sensors detect mass but no electromagnetic signature. No heat, no radiation. It's like a hole in space." Director Kwan stepped forward. He looked older than he had when they left the archive, his face lined with stress. "The silent ships. From the warning. We need to leave," Taman said. His voice was steady, but his crystals were still dark. "Now, before it gets closer," Davin nodded. "Senna, plot a course back to—" The lights went out. For a moment there was complete darkness and silence. Then the emergency systems kicked in, bathing the bridge in dim red light. Alarms began wailing throughout the ship. "What happened?" Kwan demanded. Senna's hands flew across her console. "Main power just dropped to 0. Backup systems are engaging, but they won't last long. Something's draining our energy." Hana moved to the viewport. Outside, the debris field was darker than before. The stars seemed dimmer, and the shadow was closer. Much closer. She could see it now without the sensors, a patch of absolute darkness that seemed to bend the light around it. "It's feeding," she whispered. "It's feeding on our power." The ship shuddered. More alarms joined the chorus. Senna was working frantically at her console. "Engines are offline." Life support is at 30%. We're losing everything. Hana felt panic rising in her chest. This was how the Wanderers had died. Their ships had gone dark, one by one. The silent ships had drained them of power, left them floating dead in space. There has to be something we can do, Yuna said. The Wanderers survived long enough to leave warnings. They must have found a way to fight back. Hana's mind raced. She thought about the tablets she had translated, about Jiho's journal entries, about the final message carved into stone. They didn't fight, she said suddenly. They ran, they hid. Jiho said they came to the outer veil because the silent ships didn't follow them here. But that was a lie. Or she was wrong. Then what do we do? Devon asked. Hana pulled out her tablet and called up the translations. She scrolled through them frantically, looking for anything she might have missed, any clue about how the Wanderers had survived. Then she found it. A small section she had translated but not fully understood. It was from one of the tablets they had recovered from the wrecked ship. Entry 49. We discovered something about them. They're drawn to active systems, to energy, to movement. But when we powered down completely, when we became as silent as they are, they lost interest. They drifted away. She looked up at Davin. We have to shut down everything. All power, all systems. Make the ship completely dark. That's suicide, one of the engineers protested. Without life support, we'll run out of air in hours. Better than being drained dry in minutes, Quan said. Do it. Davin hesitated for only a moment. Then he gave the order. Shut it all down. Life support, engines, sensors. Everything except minimal lighting in this room so we can see what we're doing. The crew moved quickly. Senna's hands flew across her console, manually shutting down system after system. The hum of the engines died. The air circulation stopped. The temperature immediately began to drop. Through the viewport, Hana watched the shadow. It had been moving toward them, but now it slowed. It drifted in space like it was confused. It's working, Taman said quietly. They waited in the dim red light of the emergency systems. Minutes passed. The shadow circled the meridian once, twice. Then it began to drift away, moving back toward the debris field. Hana realized she had been holding her breath. She let it out slowly. How long do we wait? Yuna whispered. Until we're sure it's gone, Davin said. Or until we start running out of air. Whichever comes first. They sat in silence for what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes. The temperature dropped steadily. Hana could see her breath forming small clouds in the air. Her fingers were going numb. Finally, Senna spoke. It's out of sensor range. Whatever it was, it's moved on. Davin nodded. Bring systems back online, slowly. Don't trigger anything that might attract attention. The ship came back to life in stages. First the reactor, humming quietly in the depths of the vessel. Then life support, flooding the bridge with warm air. Then navigation and communications. Plot a course for the archive, Quan ordered. Best speed. I want to be as far from here as possible. But Hana wasn't ready to leave yet. Wait, there's more down there. More tablets. More information. We barely scratched the surface. We almost died, Davin said flatly. We're not going back. But we need to understand. No, Quan interrupted. His voice was firm. Captain Davin is right. We have enough. More than enough. Hana wanted to argue, but she could see the fear in everyone's faces. They had seen something that shouldn't exist, something that had hunted humans across thousands of light years and thousands of years. Senna engaged the engines. The Meridian turned away from the debris field and began accelerating. Within minutes, they had jumped to FTL, leaving the outer veil behind. The journey back took 3 weeks, just like the journey out. But it felt different. Quieter. Hana spent most of her time in her quarters reviewing the data they had collected, the tablets they had scanned, the entries she had translated. She kept coming back to Jiho's final message. The woman had known she was going to die. She had accepted it, but she had still tried to warn whoever came after. On the 15th day, Taman came to her quarters. He sat down across from her without being invited. You're thinking about going back, he said. It wasn't a question. Hana set down her tablet. We found a piece of human history that changes everything we thought we knew. And we just ran away. We survived, Taman corrected. That's what Jiho wanted. She wanted people to know what happened, but she also wanted them to stay away. But why? Hana asked. What are those things? Where did they come from? What do they want? Maybe those aren't questions we're meant to answer, Taman said gently. Maybe some mysteries are better left alone. Hana looked at her grandmother's notebook, sitting on the desk beside her tablet. She thought about all the dead languages her grandmother had documented, all the ways humans had tried to communicate to leave messages to be remembered. What are we going to tell people? She asked. When we get back to the archive. When they ask what we found. The truth, Taman said. That humans had a civilization we never knew about. That they achieved incredible things. And that they left us a warning we should take seriously. When they finally arrived at the archive station, Director Kwan called an immediate meeting with the Galactic Council. Hana stood before the assembled representatives and showed them everything. The translations, the journal entries, the sensor recordings of the shadow that had nearly killed them. The chamber was silent when she finished. Then Velcro spoke. This information is classified immediately. No one outside this room hears about it. You can't be serious, Yuna protested. This is the most significant archaeological discovery in galactic history. It's also potentially catastrophic, Velcros interrupted. If other species learn that there are entities in the outer veil that can drain ships of power, that can exist between dimensions, it will cause panic. And if they learn that these entities were somehow attracted to human activity, it could turn the entire galaxy against your species. Hana felt sick. You're going to bury this. Pretend we found nothing. We're going to protect you, Velcro said. His tone was almost gentle. And protect the galaxy. The Wanderers made a choice to erase themselves from history. We're going to honor that choice. Director Kwan looked at Hana. She could see the conflict in his eyes. He wanted the truth to be known. But he also understood the politics. Humanity was still new to the galactic community. Still fragile. We'll comply, Kwan said finally. The information stays classified. The council dispersed. Hana, Yuna, and Taman were escorted to a secure area of the archive where they were debriefed for hours. They were made to sign documents promising never to speak about what they had found. Their research materials were confiscated, but they couldn't take Hana's grandmother's notebook. It was personal property, and it contained no classified information, just old Earth scripts that most of the galaxy had never heard of. That night, Hana sat in her quarters and opened the notebook to page 6. She looked at the drawings of Boustrophodon, Ogum Edu Oracle bone script, all the forgotten ways humans had tried to communicate. She thought about Jiho, 11,000 years ago, choosing these specific scripts to hide her message. She had picked languages that were already dying, already fading from memory. She had known that by the time anyone could read her warning, those languages would be completely gone. Except they weren't gone, because one old woman on Earth had spent her life documenting them, had written them down in a leather notebook and passed it to her granddaughter. Hana picked up a pen, an actual pen because she liked writing on paper, and turned to a blank page at the back of the notebook. She began to write. My name is Hana. I found something in the outer veil. They're going to make me forget it or pretend to forget it. So I'm writing this down. If someone finds this notebook someday, if someone reads this page, know that we're not alone. We've never been alone, and we need to be careful about what we look for in the dark. She closed the notebook and put it in her bag. Tomorrow she would request a transfer back to Earth. She would continue her work on dead languages, but from home, where she could keep her grandmother's notebook safe, where she could keep the warning alive, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the next person who might need to know. Outside her window, the neutron star pulsed its eternal rhythm, and somewhere in the depths of space, in the outer veil, the silent ships continued their patient watch. Waiting, always waiting.